Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Investigators unearth a massive Somali courier network lugging hundreds of millions of dollars in suitcase cash through U.S. airports before taking that money overseas. President Trump threatens to invoke the rarely used Insurrection Act and send thousands of federal troops to quell the ongoing disturbances in Minnesota. And ICE agents now reportedly preparing to take over the entire Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport in order to inspect the documents of passengers and employees alike. Also, the GOP promotes a new bill on Capitol Hill that would speed up the deportation of criminal illegal immigrants. And get this, an Oscar-winning Hollywood superstar applies for a trademark on his world-famous catchphrase in order to protect himself from AI. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and what the heck, we'll start with this one. A shocking revelation concerning hundreds of millions of U.S. dollars. They're currently being carried out of our country in suitcases and then taken directly to Europe and the Middle East. I think right about now we're having a Samsonite moment. According to reports, federal agents are now investigating an intricate and sophisticated operation which collects cash from a number of Somali immigrant communities throughout the country, stuffs it into suitcases, and then ferries it through the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport before sending it overseas. So, the reports come from an organization called Just the News. They claim that in the past couple of years alone, TSA agents have discovered nearly $700 million in cash, leaving that airport on its way to international hubs like Amsterdam and Dubai, where they then lost track of where it was ultimately headed. And how hard can it be to track down all that dough? Officials say they're highly suspicious of the amount of cash that these Somali couriers are moving through Minneapolis because it's nearly 100 times more than what they're finding in airports serving much larger cities, places like New York, Atlanta, Seattle as well. Additionally, Homeland Security officials who are following the breadcrumbs back to their original source now say that one major trail has led them straight to Columbus, Ohio, where in the past couple of years, TSA agents have found more than $135 million in cash tucked away in the luggage of American citizens of Somali origin, and which just happens to be the second largest Somali community in the entire U.S. Officials say that contrary to popular belief, in every instance, the couriers always brazenly stayed above board and openly declared the amount of cash they were carrying on their legal documents because they knew no one would do a darn thing about it. They also claim that TSA agents tried for years to alert the former Biden administration about what was going on, but that their warnings always fell on deaf ears. But in defense of then-President Joe Biden, you'll recall Grandpa Joe saying, and I quote, "We finally beat Medicare." Editor Pranav, if you would.
We finally beat Medicare.
I always like that guy, Joe Biden. In the meantime, federal lawmakers are just now starting to catch wind of this latest scandal, with Homeland Security Committee Chairman Senator Rand Paul saying that the Somalis were so good at what they were doing, didn't even try to hide it. Also says that what we're learning right now, just the tip of the iceberg. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. The pieces of this puzzle, they're so easy to assemble that a 4-year-old child with a blindfold on could easily connect the dots, and with only limited effort. Hey, look, this is a phenomenal amount of money coming out of Ohio and Minneapolis en route to far-off overseas locations, way over there. And the movers and shakers behind these transportation projects, they're described as U.S. citizens of Somali descent. I'm just thinking out loud, and I wonder if that piques your curiosity. Now, this whole thing only sounds mildly suspicious to me because when I travel, I never carry more than a couple $100 in cash by American Express card and a big jar of these chewable Tums. Not complaining, I'm just saying that airport victuals, they're absolutely rock bottom. Funny thing is, while this was all happening during the Biden years, Grandpa Joe and his border czar partner in crime, Kamala Harris, didn't seem the least bit concerned. While tons and tons of dough was making its way into and out of Minnesota, it doesn't mean that Congress gal Ilhan Omar or Governor Tim Walz should be implicated in any wrongdoing, as both of those esteemed individuals are, by most accounts, honest, trustworthy, and at all times acting in the best interest of all those whom they represent. Hey, look, there's a thing in life called unexplained coincidence, that hundreds of millions of dollars tucked neatly into suitcases were moving through a state which is being investigated for a reported $9 billion in fraud should not raise any suspicions among anybody at any time. Switch things up just a bit now, shift our focus to what's happening right now on the ground in Minnesota, where trouble is brewing. Dangerous protests are still growing. And yeah, President Trump is threatening to put an end to all the highly destructive nonsense once and for all. 47 now saying that if state officials in Minneapolis don't get their act together and in a hurry, lickety-split, and prevent rioters from continually attacking ICE agents, he'll be forced to invoke the seldom-used Insurrection Act and deploy U.S. military to that area. President says that if Minnesota's corrupt politicians don't obey the law and stop what he calls professional agitators and insurrectionists from targeting American patriots like ICE, he'll have no other choice but to call in the troops, the big guns. In case you're not aware, according to the Insurrection Act, an American president has the authority to use soldiers from both the military and federalized National Guard to squash any type of civil disorder or armed rebellion against the U.S. government. Hasn't been used since the 1992 Los Angeles riots. I live in L.A. I was here when that was happening. It's a frightening scene. In this case, Trump's threat to use the measure comes just hours after an ICE agent was forced to defend himself by shooting an illegal immigrant in the leg following a traffic stop. Now, that incident took place only days after the tragic killing of 37-year-old Renee Good. We all know that story now. And combined, they are pouring gas on the fire and triggering waves of potentially violent demonstrations. For his part, Governor Tim Walz says that what's happening in his state defies belief. And he claims that as bad as it's already been, President Trump, he says, is doing everything he can to make things worse. Says the commander-in-chief wants there to be chaos, confusion, and violence on the streets, so he has an excuse to send in the cavalry. Well, good job there, Timbo, but you got that one entirely backwards. Additionally, he's also urging Minnesotans to demonstrate peacefully and to carry their smartphones at all times so they can videotape or film ICE agents as they go about their business in order to create a database of their atrocities. Meanwhile, the White House says that the governor should stick to cleaning up his fraud mess. I'd say all the Ajax, Comet, and SOS pads in the world. You can't clean up that fraud mess. Or better yet, simply resign. And we said that right here on the program yesterday. That's the solution right now. They say that ever since this entire fiasco began, Walz and his fellow Democrats have done nothing but crank up the temperature, smear the heroes of ICE, and actively incite violence, all in the name of criminal illegal aliens. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, there is right now just one problem with President Trump invoking the Insurrection Act. He's waited too damn long to do it. Chunks of Minnesota, they're out of control. There are tons of illegal immigrants, far too much crime, and a total lack of regard for law and order in that part of the country. You got a rogue, incompetent governor, Tim Walz, in Minnesota, an evil congresswoman in that state's 5th district, the lovely and talented Ilhan Omar, and the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. He's no bucket of yucks. The three of them combined, along with a cast of far too many uneducated cretins, are doing all they can to deflect from a gargantuan amount of fraud in their state by generating chaos and mayhem. And in my estimation, they should each be removed from office and immediately locked up. That state and local government officials are battling federal law enforcement and encouraging others to do likewise is both un-American and obtuse. Yes, obtuse. That's stupid or unintelligent. Editor Pranov, cut 19, please.
How can you be so obtuse?
What did you call me?
Obtuse.
You know, here at the Big News Roundup, we love that word obtuse. We also love the good old Shawshank Redemption. Hey, by the way, you never see this guy, Editor Pranov the Magnificent, but he's in that booth right over there, sitting on a beach chair, wearing Bermuda shorts, sunglasses, drinking a cactus cooler, and running this entire program from his iPhone. The guy works 20 minutes a day and makes millions. He's the ultimate rock star. With that, let it be known that on this day, at this hour, I am signing off on 47, invoking the Insurrection Act. And it's time to take back Minnesota. Mr. President, so you know, the News Roundup, we've got your back. We'll stick with ICE a bit longer now and turn our attention to breaking developments concerning a surprising move by that federal agency to significantly ramp up their immigration control efforts in the Twin Cities. According to reports, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Team will soon be stationing themselves throughout the entire Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. And that's where they plan to check the IDs of every person who crosses their path. Yeah, a bunch of extra work, but it might be necessary. The report says the information was leaked by an unnamed airport employee who claims that right now, ICE is currently preparing to occupy the facility for about a month in order to ramp up their ongoing campaign in the area by targeting passengers, employees as well, and more. For their part, the airport itself remains extremely tight-lipped about the deployment, saying they never receive advance notice of ICE activities. However, they go on to point out that federal immigration agents have the legal right to position themselves throughout the terminal in order to check people's credentials. So, you know. In the meantime, concerned authorities nationwide, they're now beginning to take substantial steps to educate the American people about their constitutional rights concerning any potential interactions with federal agents. They say that while green card holders are required to carry their proper paperwork with them at all times, it's not necessary for U.S. citizens to do so. However, they also warn that if you don't have your ID on you when you run into ICE, it's entirely possible that you'll be hauled away as part of a very inconvenient wrongful detention before everything eventually kind of gets straightened out. You know the routine. And final thoughts, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. If there's any question about just how pathetic things have become in lawless Minneapolis, this should kind of clear everything up. You know, so wretched now that ICE agents are going to have to move into the big airport, Minneapolis-St. Paul International. Locals call that one MSP, to make sure everyone is on the up and up. By the way, to avoid any confusion, this is all being done due to the actions of Governor Walz, Congresswoman Omar, and a bunch of others who want nothing more than to dismantle and destroy big chunks of Minnesota. It's all pretty clear. The state's been so poorly managed and mangled that the feds have to come to the rescue to ensure that everyone plays by the rules, and it's being done in the interest of public safety. And make no mistake, like diners at a fine restaurant who crave caviar, love lobster with drawn butter, and drool over duck à l'orange, Minnesota officials absolutely adore the feds moving in, and here's why. Now they get to pretend that they're the real victims who are being invaded and having their rights violated. Truth be told, the state is being destroyed from within by fraud, corruption, and illegal immigration, unchecked crime as well, and a bunch more. Governor Walz, he's on his way out, and before he leaves, he'll do all he can to tear down his state. But the feds will do all they can to stop him in his tracks. Or change gears now and take a closer look at some alarming information coming to us from the Department of War concerning the Chinese Communist Party and their ultimate goal to replace our country as the world's last remaining superpower. According to the Pentagon's annual report, for decades now, the Chinese Communist regime has been using all of its resources and technology to cobble together a world-class military as part of an international plan to displace the U.S., displace us as the most powerful nation on the entire planet. The report goes on to reveal that the CCP measures everything they do against their strong enemy, which is us, the U.S., and that their top military strategy focuses squarely on winning a total war against our country. Additionally, it warns that China's unprecedented military buildup has made our American homeland increasingly vulnerable and that their ongoing arsenal of nuclear, conventional, and cyber weapons, they're a direct threat to our nation's overall security. You should be very concerned about this. In the meantime, experts say the expanding threat of the CCP directly linked to a number of the Trump administration's recent foreign policy moves, including the raid to displace Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela and the president's desire to take over the strategic Arctic island of Greenland. Now, some additional headlines we're also keeping a very close watch on here in the sprawling News Roundup newsroom. And first up in Washington, the GOP has just introduced a new bill aimed at speeding up the deportation of any non-citizen who's convicted of either a single felony or 2 misdemeanor crimes, saying the measure is designed to improve public safety throughout our entire nation. Moving along, President Trump is forging ahead with his proposal to put a 1-year 10% cap on all credit card rates throughout the U.S. Man 47 says the current interest rate's simply too high and that he'll no longer allow the American public to get ripped off any longer. And on the international front, the Kremlin now says they're in full agreement with President Trump and that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's the one who's currently holding up a potential peace deal which would end the war in Ukraine. Gone on for far too long. All right, now a bit of gander, a bit of a look at showbiz news, and we kick things off today with a popular Hollywood heartthrob who's taken a big step in the growing battle between actors and AI. Oscar winner Matthew Mcconaughey has just received a trademark for his classic catchphrase. I think he says all right 3 or 4 times. I have no idea. I'm not a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey, but I know who he is. And he says the move was necessary to kind of protect himself against any future AI-generated misuse of his likeness.
All right.
Don't know him real well, but I guess I kind of like him. They say Matthew McConaughey is a stand-up guy, great actor as well, but I think he just wasted a bunch of time and money on lawyers trying to protect him from AI stealing a bunch of his best lines. Well, first off, they say imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, so he should actually thank AI in advance. And second, we all know that AI is nothing more than a passing fad, kind of like computers in general, and it's never going to catch on. Sticking around Hollywood just a bit longer and turning to a new feud, which is just now bubbling to the surface. 35-year-old beauty Jennifer Lawrence claims she actually lost out on a plum role in Quentin Tarantino's 2019 classic, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, simply because of her looks. The Academy Award-winning actress says that in the end, it came down to her and actress Margot Robbie for the high-profile part of Sharon Tate, and that ultimately Tarantino decided against casting her merely because he says she wasn't pretty enough. Kind of like the pot calling the kettle black. You can say a lot of things about movie star Jennifer Lawrence. You can say she's an Academy Award winner. You can say her films have grossed over $6 billion worldwide. And you can say she was the world's highest paid actress in 2015 and 2016. One thing you can't say is that she's not pretty enough. Yeah, she's the real deal, a fine talent, easy to get along with, and maybe not as good looking as Quentin Tarantino. But by and large, I say she's kind of easy on the eyes. And turning now to somebody who's got to be considered a bit of a rock star, no matter how you slice it or dice it. Check this guy out. Saudi Arabia's oldest man just reportedly passed away at the tender young age of 142, leaving behind more than 100 surviving children and grandchildren. And according to reports, the former living legend married his last wife when he was 110 and even had a daughter with her. I get that guy's autograph. Meanwhile, experts say there might be a bit of a debate regarding the man's actual age, since records in that part of the world are mildly questionable. But look, you got to hand it to a guy who's been lucky enough to celebrate, allegedly, 142 birthdays. And we're sure he's seen a lot over the course of the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. By the way, we only found out about this story because Keith Richards, the guitar player with the Rolling Stones, Keith went to high school with this guy, and he called us earlier today here on the hotline to share this very, very sad news. We're sorry for your loss, Keith, but keep on rocking the planet. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Big News Roundup. Have an awesome day today. Stay safe. And if you haven't done so already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And with that, we're going to dim the lights. We're going to fade to black oh so gently. And we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Big News Roundup.